let's talk about monsters in Dungeons and Dragons. Now, some of this might leak over to other games. Many games are inspired by D&D, so I'm sure some of what I talk about here will be helpful for other games, because I'm talking more in a general sense. You know, I'm an AD&D 2nd edition guy, and there's a lot of monsters in 2nd edition. And when you really study the monsters, you find out they're not all there for combat encounters. Not every monster is evil. So, you know, you don't look at every monster as potential combat. It's there, but you're not always looking for a monster for that reason. Right? A monster might be something that is like a treasure. Like the other day I talked about the golden badger, the Aurum vorax, right? Like if you catch them, they eat gold. So you're probably going to find gold near that monster, some type of gold ore. And their fur, it's worth a fortune. If you skin that off right, like you can probably get enough money if you run into the right person where your character could, you know, retire, at least live off that money for the rest of their life, even if they're not living like some king with their own little, you know, fort and army, right? They could just survive off that money. So not all monsters are there for a combat encounter. Now, regardless of the kind of monster, maybe even one that you would have combat with, some monsters affect the terrain. Like I talked about the ink hag the other day, where the chemicals they give off from their body, if they're under, like, say, farmland, suddenly you can start seeing things grow faster, growing twice the size. The land is benefiting, strangely, from the monster, but the livestock might be, you know, disappearing. People might be disappearing, right? So not every monster is just there for a combat encounter, right? So read up on the monsters, check out the monsters. And if there's not many details about a monster, well, you can always add details in. Let players take advantage of the details that you give when you say that they are encountering a monster or see a monster, right? And here's what I mean. Some DMs will try to rush something towards the characters in an unrealistic way. Like, you describe the monster, and the monster should be about 100, 200 yards away from where the group is. And the next thing you know, you're saying, okay, well, the monster takes out his weapon and he swings it at the characters. Oh, what? His weapon reaches 200 fucking yards and hits me in the head? Well, no, he moved during that time. Well, that would take rounds in, right, DM? Why the fuck didn't I get a chance to do something before he walked the 200 goddamn yards and swung his weapon at me? Do you know how many DMs in the old school, and I still see happening in the new school quite often, that do that? The monster is described in a way that should be too far away from the characters just to swing and hit them, and then the monster can just swing and hit them, right? Let your players take advantage of the details, and if that works against the monster, so fucking be it. Let it happen. And if you don't want them taking advantage of such details, don't put those details in, right? And I'm sorry, if a monster can't just easily surprise your group, well, you're just going to have to allow it to play out the way it is. And maybe they do shoot down the challenging monster before it gets to them, right? That's part of realism that you're going to allow to happen in the game. And you'll be surprised, even when you give all this room to player characters, sometimes they screw things up. Even with all the time in the world and the actions, the monster still gets to them. It's still a challenge. It still happens. But let your players take advantage of details all the time. And let that be a challenge to you. Like, if you think that this group of monsters would want to surprise your group, well, how would they do that given the situation and the terrain? And that's going to be a challenge to you to figure out how you would do that with those monsters. And if you can't, so be it. Let things play out as they are. Be as fair as you can to the player characters. And then when you get to a situation where a monster can cheaply, surprise them and get them, there's no complaints from your players because you're not doing this in some cheap manner all the time. You let them take advantage of details. They'll trust you, and that's how you build up trust. They'll know that if that monster just got the jump on them, it's probably legit, and you're not going to hear as many complaints from your players. But if you're doing careless shit all the time, well, you're going to hear shit from your players, right? This is a mind game. I like to spook players' characters, with, the ogre off in the distance that they can clearly see. Or maybe they hear a noise from a bulle. They don't know it's a bulle right away, but they hear the noise under them, coming up towards them. What's that? They can take advantage of all the time they want. Maybe they can see the group of orcs. Here's what I know. It's a mind game. These threats will mess with their mind even if they have the advantage. So, in some cases, it's not about overcoming, the challenge. Maybe they wipe out the group of orcs really easy. But that little moment where they see them and they're not sure what's going on and they're all over the place, I love that. I love that. And in some cases, no matter how much, time they have, like I pointed out already, sometimes it doesn't work out for them. So now they're scared of the ogre, they didn't take it down, and the ogre is now close enough for real, in a realistic way, to swing their fucking giant tree club at the head of one of the characters and kill him in one shot, right? So, I like to remind myself it's a mind game, and when you put stuff out there where they can see the enemy clearly, understand it is messing with the players' minds, and that experience is interesting. It's interesting to go through that with players, to hear them, conversate with their characters over what's going on. And I want you to start looking at the terrain as some random, thing. That every so often I want you to decide that there's going to be a terrain effect. That means there's enough rocks around here somebody could trip on a rock, right? So that's another thing I want you to consider. Maybe they run into something, maybe they run through bushes chasing the monster and they're caught in the bushes, right? They get stuck in them. Or maybe they trip up over the rock, or maybe the goblin does. And you might think, well, I have to have a chart for that? No, just make it random. Don't do it every fight. Maybe do it every third fight on purpose. Put some order in there, but bring that randomness to the situation. Be unpredictable. Just maybe the goblins are having a hard time hitting that very high level knight in your game. The high level knight character, the paladin, right? And so the goblins aren't sure what to do. They're all missing. So what if all the goblins around that knight, before they get cut down, start trying to grab onto him? Grab onto his legs. And maybe one rolls the 19 or 20 and gets a hold of the leg. Maybe two do. Well, as soon as one or two of them get a hold of that, that knight, that paladin, maybe the other two go back to attacking, because likely, if the DM is being realistic, that grabbing onto the legs is going to harm the armor class of the paladin. Make it easier for him to be hit. And easier to be hit should be quite obvious. Like you see your partner, I got a hold of the leg. Well, now I'm going to swing at him right now. And now the goblins can hit the paladin more on like a 15 or a 14 instead of on a 19 or 20 or something in that vein, right? Remember, the monsters can be clever too, and not every trick needs to be written in the book to use common sense. And if you have a monster that has a high enough intelligence score to be able to say they would do some trickery like this, well, remember to do it. Like, that can happen. Again, I look at goblins and humanoid creatures that can think, and if they are trying to lure, or capture a group of people coming through a territory, they're probably going to set up outside traps, right? Ones that can wrap around your legs, or a hole that they dig out for you to fall into, and it has some weird oil. And next thing you know, a torch is being thrown down with you, and that oil is being lit up, and you, the high-level character that should easily take out the goblins, well, now you're burning to death. So much for the stats, working out for you in this way. Like, don't underestimate your enemy. When it comes to running monsters in a D&D game or in any game, realistically, it comes down to how you view combat. So, what can you apply to combat through your common sense that doesn't have to break the mechanics of the game, but the mechanics don't really cover. Your common sense is going to cover. And then each monster is going to have details written about it. So you have to go look at the monster, look at their intelligence, and say to yourself, what more can I apply here, right? Through common sense, through a level of realism that isn't written down in the monster. And there's going to be all kinds of ideas you can come up with. And if you really look at combat in a general way, you can come up with these ideas for terrain, everything else, right? And if you're not doing it, if you haven't done it before, don't just count on your memory to remember the stuff even after hearing a video like this. Write it down at first. Here's what happens. If you haven't done something before, usually you have to create a habit. Well, how do you do that? Well, usually you have to artificially make yourself start doing the activity. A little bit of fake it till you make it. Meaning, you don't just count on your instincts to jump in with your memory to take over something you haven't done before. You make yourself do it. You have the reminder there. And then after you've done it once or twice, you'll start just remembering to see things this way and approach things this way. And then suddenly you don't need it written down anymore. The habit is formed. But until you form that habit, you got to make yourself do these activities, right? But by doing the activities, you'll form the habit to the point you don't need the notes anymore. But you got to get there first. And in most cases, it's not just going to happen. Don't, when you're going to do something as a DM, don't just trust your memory to cover everything. Don't trust your mind has everything down, right? Don't have that kind of ego. Put that aside. Get what you need. Don't be a fake hoping it works out, right? Be a real person. Create the habit. You know it exists. And now you are a person that can do this without the notes, right? Now you are the real deal, not just assuming you are that and you can just naturally bring that. In most cases, you can't. Be a little humble. It will get you to the top of the mountain faster. All right, for now, take care. You know what you can do? You can hit the like button. You can share the video. Oh, and there's another button you can press. That one that lets you subscribe to my channel for more content. Oh yeah, there's that bell thing. You can press that so you know when I've uploaded a new video right away.